Good day, everyone. Welcome to the Be Better Daily podcast. So, I just wanted to record a quick little intro. I'm your host, Rob Greaves. This is the first podcast that I've ever launched, and what we're going to be doing is the aim is to have quality conversations with high performers, but also your general population who have lived some extraordinary lives and have some of their own stories to share and tell. And the main goal is to provide listeners with some real world experience and some real world insights. And hopefully we can get some actionable tips that can be applied to our own lives, and to help us be better and build better cultures and people around us. Who's it for? It's for anyone who's maybe looking to overcome any challenges of their own, to anyone seeking that extra little bit of pep or motivation, and just to, like I said, to help us all along this journey that we call life, that we're all on, and that we can do it together. So I hope that we can inspire each other to take action and meaningful steps towards our dreams. So anywho, the first guest that we got was Eimear Boland. So I had a really good conversation with her, and I just want to put a little word of warning out there, that we do talk a little bit about some trauma. We talk about homelessness and a particular journey with weight and surgery and cancer. So just a little trigger warning there. If you may have any issues with those things, that's just a little heads up for you. Otherwise, look, these conversations are done with the best of intent. And if you do need help or anything, just reach out or utilize the pathways that you have. But I hope that we can inspire, like I said, and help the general public and anyone out there that may be listening. So please like, share, and subscribe. I'll start creating a bit more of a professional intro as we go along, but I hope you enjoy my conversation with Eimear. So Eimear, I'll get you to introduce yourself to the listeners, and so who is Eimear Boland?
Who am I? Rob, thanks for having me on. Who am I? So I'm an Irish woman, living currently in Ireland, but I have been living in Australia since 2012, in Perth, Western Australia, where you are now. And I am freezing my ass off in Ireland, in Dublin at the moment, where I was born 40 years ago. I grew up in a suburban area, went to the local school, have parents, a father who is a police officer, what we call as a guard over here, and my mum is a hairdresser, and I'm one of four. So 3 other siblings, 2 brothers and a sister. Fortunate that my brothers live in Australia as well, so that's pretty cool. I followed them out, as I said, in 2012. A little bit about, though, who am I? I suppose my childhood, I went to school, as you do. It wasn't very academic, wasn't my forte. Tried really hard, but wasn't the best in school. I had really, really cool teachers that kind of believed in me and would reinforce, look, you're not going to go down an academic route, but you'll find your way. You'll find something that you're interested in. So just kind of stay the course. I look back, like, it's interesting when you start reflecting then when you're older of going, like, who are those people? Like, what are those little things? What are the reinforcing that you're okay, you're enough, to try shape what you're going to do into the future.
Yeah.
And when I was finishing, when I was finishing school, though, I suppose it changed a little bit because of my final year. I came out with all but 2 of the awards at the end of the year, and that was because of the character, because of being like head girl, like your prefect. I got an award called the Claudine Thevenet Award, and that is the founder, the religious founder of the Catholic school that I went to. And what that meant was I was awarded for the volunteer work. So from an early age, I just devoted my time and energy into doing any volunteering that I could do. So I was reading out the bingo numbers on a Saturday morning for about 4 years in an old folks home, which is pretty cool, pretty fun. And then I went on to doing a lot in the youth space, and I'll go on to that when I talk about my career. But I suppose the early stages of being out there, being amongst the community, helping where I could, was what I loved to do. And I continue to do that then into a career.
How'd you get into that? Like, what got you into volunteering at such a young age? Is this something your parents got you into, or is it?
Yeah, I think I watched my dad. So my dad was the first ever community police officer. So we called them community guards. And he was a juvenile liaison officer, which meant he was focusing on the most at-risk young people in community and deterring them away from the criminal justice system. So getting them out of the justice system. Their families were stuck in the justice system. They're in and out of prison. A lot of misuse of drugs, a lot of drinking, a lot of abuse and trauma. And I think from listening to his work and getting a bit of exposure, so I would go to, they'd have these sort of youth clubs or parties every Christmas, and I was one of the volunteers. But I realized, but probably later on, the privilege that I had in, my parents working and how we were brought up was very different to a lot of these kids' experiences. But I think it shaped a bit of a passion, or a little bit of a passion in me to go, how can I give back? And I didn't really have the fear that a lot of people had amongst these young people. So they were seen as, the criminals, the thieves, the bad, like real negative. Like society would tell you that it's, these people are to be left aside and to stay away from. But I didn't. I leaned in and was amongst them and kind of found my own. I don't know whether it was like my own place amongst that, but I just felt comfortable. And I suppose the volunteering in the most lower socioeconomic areas in Dublin, like I went into the trenches. I went into areas where if you were a female from the south side of Dublin, which is a privileged area that I grew up in, going into these places was a bit foreign. Like people weren't doing that. But I felt, because of the exposure and because of the passion and the drive that my dad had within community, it definitely sparked something in me to go and volunteer and help.
Yeah, wicked. That's pretty awesome. And so your father, where do you think he found his passion for that from?
I think it stems back to the family. Like, so they grew up in west of Ireland in a small country town. His dad was a publican, so they owned a bar, they owned a fish and tackle shop, and a funeral home, all in one. So a bit random. So there's a running joke that you go out fishing, you come back and you get drunk, and then you pass away, and all of the services could be supported by the Bolands in this country town.
The business model.
Yeah, it's funny, but I think for him, the work ethic was there. Like he was driven by his parents, the work ethic, and then my parents then. So my mom, a hairdresser, she was in community, so she was. It didn't matter if you had, any money or you were the richest. She treated you equally, and when you're in that chair, she wanted to know not only what haircut you wanted or color or perm or whatever, she wanted to know how you were, like, how are you going? And she has this immense sort of connection with people very, very early, like within minutes of meeting her. She can kind of get to the core, cut all the crap and get to the core of who you are. So yeah, watching them and also them pushing me to go, you can do this. Like when I think back at the school times of like, oh, I'm failing and I'm not doing right in school, they were just constantly, especially my mom, like, don't let anybody tell you that you can't do it. You can do it. And she was like such an advocate for me. I mean, she'd go up to the school when I'd have run-ins and stuff like that. I was always a real good kid, but when it came to the academic, I was emotionally reacting then when I wasn't doing so well or I'd fail or whatever. But she would advocate, no, like, you're not dropping down class or you're not being left aside and all this. Like, she fought my corner, which helped me then fight for all these young people then that I got an opportunity and a privilege to work alongside.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome. That's wicked. I love it. It's cool to know because it matches how that, like, learning about your parents, and obviously I know who you are and your personality and how you are. It just makes sense.
Yeah. It's interesting though, because the piece of like who I was and why I volunteered, if I actually go a layer deeper, and happy to share this with you.
Yeah.
My mum got sick when I was 15 years of age, so she got breast cancer, and it literally flipped my world upside down. Mum, very independent, very caring for everybody else. And here she was in a role where she had to receive support and care from others, and that didn't come naturally to Mum. And instead of, I suppose, allowing us to do the care or whatever that meant, she didn't want to deprive us of our childhood. So I got into volunteering a lot more then. So I know the pivotal time in my life at the age of 15, I went from, doing a little bit to, I'm going to kind of run away and do everything for everybody else because I can't do things for her, which was breaking my heart. I need to now do everything for the community. So I was very much like, it was filling a need within me, like that helper driver. I was getting validation. I was good enough. I was, able to help these people. But I know it came from a place of pain because I couldn't support her, and just watched her go over a journey of probably 10 plus years of recovering from her breast cancer, and just not knowing enough about that journey, but also still having her as a very strong, supportive role model to me, constantly making sure I was okay. Like, even to the point I would reflect back on, even to the point where she needed to get her operation, she needed to get her surgery for the breast cancer. She had a mastectomy, so that's a breast off. Whenever she was going in, she delayed it by 3 months because I had my school play.
Oh, really?
Like, why she did that to this day blows my mind, but that's the dedication that this woman has. Like, she will go to the ends of the earth for her kids and still does to this day. Like, there's nothing changing there. Like, she's gonna fight and not disturb anything on our path. And I think credit to her, and super grateful for that journey as well with her.
Want to bring it back. So you were 15 years old, and out of the blue, Mum gets diagnosed with breast cancer.
Yeah.
So obviously, are the boys still at home then?
Yeah.
So you got 2 boys and the 2 girls all at home, family unit, and then this just comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Can you take us back to that time? What was it like finding out? Like, what was the impact, and how did it sort of go about finding out? Was it a long process, or was it just straight away? Or
look, she knew for a lot longer than we knew. So she, as I said, like, she didn't want to disturb my play and me doing my school thing. So she didn't tell us for a long time, and what she told each of us was very different. So her approach to me was, just need to go in for this little operation. I'll be all good. Never mentioned the word cancer. And just said, I'll be in after, in and out after a couple of days. Kind of like, I'm not sick. This is just something I got to do. To my younger brother, she talked about the similarities between, Pamela Anderson and their boob job, and it was time to go get a boob job, and his interpretation was nearly like she might be sad and she needs to go get a boob job done. But we interpreted it all very differently, and we didn't note the extent. I remember very vividly walking into the hospital room after her surgery and her tubes of blood hanging out of her. And just that graphic sort of memory of like, whoa, Mum's not good, like mum's not well, and she was very sick, obviously, but still putting on that bright face, like, how was school today? What's going on for you? And it broke me. Like I really struggled with seeing this person who I love and who, you know, I look up to and who cared for me. Our attachment was very close, even from a very, very early age. I didn't even go to play school because I didn't want to be away from her. But then here I was at 15 years of age, you know, a teenager, and not being able to understand what was going on, but also knowing how much she's reared me to go, you stand in front of it and you face it and let's go. Like nothing was going to stop her. So I needed to take that approach as well. So I know that during that time, whilst I struggled a lot, how I sort of dealt with that was, let's go out and volunteer, let's go and do these things. And always doing the dishes at home and looking after everybody else in the house was kind of my role that I played within all of that, and probably still play to that to today. But I learned that from an early age, like, she needs a bit of help here, let's do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so was it just the surgery and then it was okay after that, or was there a long period of treatment? Was this like a drawn out period for a couple of years, or?
Yeah, great question. She it was a bit drawn out, but only because she was on a trial drug, and then she refused everything. She refused chemo, she refused radiotherapy. She knew that it would lessen her chances of getting cancer back again, but in her eyes, it was like going from, you know, like that's a very small percentage that it would impact if she did the chemo. She didn't want to be sick anymore. She knew she needed to care for her kids. 4 kids. Dad worked very hard, so he was out a lot. So she wanted to be there and to provide. So it kind of wasn't an option for her, and she just wanted to. She wouldn't have been a mad fan of medications and all the pumping the system with all this synthetic. She just wasn't a fan of that. Some of the injections around that time for school that we would have needed, she didn't agree with. Like, let's not pump in flu vaccines, let's not pump in all of that. So I think that kind of shaped her decision or influenced her decision not to go for chemo and radiotherapy. And she was on this drug was for a number of years. And then she went into remission, and it was great then, because she changed her health, and she was in a healthy position for a very long time.
Nice.
Yeah.
How old is she now?
She's unwell again, unfortunately, with the diagnosis a couple of years ago of breast cancer. She's in her terminal cancer stage, unfortunately, now. So she's battled for a very long time, the last couple of years, with bowel cancer moving into liver cancer, and then kind of in the lymph nodes and spreading. She's kind of defying all the odds, as wouldn't expect anything less from her, because they thought sort of last summer that she would no longer be here, she would have passed on, but thankfully she's still here and she's fighting strong. I don't know how much of a quality of life, really. I suppose I got a phone call in May last year to say that the treatment wasn't really working that we had started in the December previous. So I made the decision to come home and care for her full time since June. So I've been here 9 months on this journey, and it's very exhausting, but it's super, super rewarding. And I honestly think it's the biggest privilege of my life to be here caring for her, as difficult as it is. But it's also being able to give back everything that she's given to me and to my siblings. So that's that's the journey that I'm on at the moment, and currently why I'm in Ireland.
Amazing. So we've jumped over a little bit, and that's my fault, but just for the listeners. So Eimear was in Perth, and she was a mental health educator in Perth. And when Mum got sick again, she made the decision to go back to Ireland to be able to assist and look after Mum, which is a pretty big decision, pretty amazing decision. And it's awesome that you've had the ability to be able to do that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, super grateful. Super grateful.
Awesome. So, like, we've talked about a few defining moments. You've always been caring for others, and that's sort of continued through. How did you go through high school? That was back home in Ireland?
Yeah.
Yeah.
High school, as I said, not very academic, but kind of got my groove by the end of it. So not just because of the awards and stuff like that, but I did devote my time to helping other students and helping the teachers out and all of those volunteer work externally. And I also kind of battled with, what am I going to do? I'm never going to be able to do university. Like, I'm not academic. I'm comparing myself to my friends in school who are really academic. I can't do this. But I knew that there was a passion there for working with young people. So I decided to go on and do a course in youth work. So I had volunteered, as I said before, in that space, but going in, I needed to get the academic side of it. I needed to get the papers to say I was a youth work and then go into that. And that's exactly what I did. I went into the inner city, Dublin, in a pretty colourful area, lots of social issues, a lot of drugs, a lot of criminal activity and all that sort of stuff. And that's where I placed myself in doing that youth work course. Could I have gone somewhere else? Absolutely. But it was brilliant. It was me starting out this passion, but getting the language behind what I was doing in practice. I was getting the language and understanding even the psychology behind what we were doing, but getting the tools, like you're a carpenter and you get your toolbox and you can work out of that. Same for me. I could get all these tools then that I could work with young people in a different way and start like looking at what their purpose was and having conversations that I would have never had before. Kind of on the surface conversations before. And then when I got the tools, it was like really delving into what was going on for the person, but in a safe way that you're not delving necessarily into the trauma, but talking about recovery and healing and what do they love doing. So I loved art and I still love art, but it was my way of, if I did art with these young people, I could communicate and I could educate them in doing the art. So like using the medium of art to educate around the misuse of drugs was really powerful. I was drawing murals on walls in bathrooms and youth centres, but in that, the conversations I was hearing about, unfortunately, pretty horrific stories of these young people going home at night and experiencing domestic violence and experiencing a lot of sexual abuse. But it was their safe place to come back and have a conversation and know that they could have the conversation. And then there was a follow-up, having further on interventions and referring on. I knew my limitations and what I could do as a youth worker, but I knew that what services then that we could refer these young people on to and be that support person for those young people, because you can say, go to this appointment and do this, but it's so daunting for us as adults, let alone for a young person going through this and navigating, I have to rock up at a certain place at a certain time and what are they going to ask me to do? There was a lot of fear. The fear also came because a lot of social workers were involved in their life and their view. I trained later on as a social care worker, a bit different than a social worker, but with a social worker, their fear was, I'm going to be removed. I'm going to be taken out of the family home. Where am I going to be placed? So that was really, really present for these young people. So they're afraid, I can't say too much because I'll be taken away from my family. And that was hard to kind of navigate those conversations with the young people. But yeah, youth work then, sorry, go on.
Like, how did that actually work? So let's say we've got these young people, they're going through this tough time, etc.
Yeah.
Were they just booked in with appointments for you, or are you going to like a youth home and they've already been taken out of the home? And like how paint a picture.
So that came after, I suppose, but in the early stages of the youth centre, I managed a youth. So I started out at 17 and I started telling the young people that I was a lot older because, the young people were up to 18 in the service and I was younger than them. So I was kind of faking it until you make it scenario of like, just don't tell them my age. There was a level of maturity because of this exposure and because of my parents. But I just pretended that I was a lot older. And how it was a youth centre. They come in, do activities. But within those activities, then you're having those conversations. But great point around the residential, because that's exactly what I went on to. I went on to study a degree in social care and I got experience in residential care. So young people, I focused all my sort of attention into the space of working with young people at risk. From the ages of 12 to 18, a lot of them were kind of 12 to 16 age group. And I worked with young men in inner city in Dublin who were experiencing homelessness. So all of them were experiencing homelessness, a number of them for a period of time, but we had a 6-bed unit. So 6 young people would live in our accommodation for short to medium term. So short to medium term was a couple of weeks to 3 months. They were meant to move on in 3 months, but unfortunately, due to their behavior, a lot of them weren't getting further placements. So we'd have them for a little bit longer. We also ran an emergency service. So every night we would have at least 2 young people come in off the streets, accompanied by social workers, or they would come in with the police. The police might have picked them up for a charge, and then they understand that they need, again, diverting them from the criminal justice system. They want them in accommodation and a roof over their head, so they'll bring them in to us, and we would place them for the night until they could get a, more stable accommodation. A number of those young people that did come in emergency ended up staying with us as a resident in the accommodation. Some of the behaviors, when I think back to what we were experiencing, again, I'm like 18, 19 years of age myself, young girl, grew up in a privileged, household. I had experienced from all my youth work some of the behaviors that young people were getting up to, but nothing to the extent of what I experienced in that residential service. I did a long couple of years in that service, working at really, really high risk behaviors for a very long time takes its toll. And I'll probably touch on that a little bit later in the burnout and what that caused. A lot of incidents, a lot of violence every night, a lot of attacks, a lot of assaults on me as well. That was pretty tough to take. You get beaten once, okay, you might stand back up, but it was kind of repetitive over a period of time. Again, if we closed the doors and discharged these young people, they'd nowhere else to go. So there was this level of, when I think back, probably unhealthy acceptance on the behaviors. So these young men were traumatized from a very, very early age. They were in families that was riddled with, again, that intergenerational trauma piece, that trauma that just carried down from generation to generation. And these young men were hurting, and the only way to cope with that hurt was to use violence, but also to use drugs. Like I was working with young boys at the age of 12 that were addicted to heroin. Like injecting heroin at the age of 12 in inner city Dublin. Absolutely frightening. But on the flip side of that, and maybe it's not even the flip side, but they were beautiful young kids who just needed somebody to believe in them. Like somebody to actually stop and go, who are you? I see you. Like, what do you love doing? Like, what are you interested in? I don't know how many times I would put them in the back of the van. So we drove this really colourful pink, purple and green. It was sponsored by the local bank. Really, really bright van. Talk about like, being discreet. There was zero discreetness going on. But like a Barney van. Anyway, we popped them in this van and we would travel around. We had cars as well out in community where we would bring them to different activities, all to try to divert them away from committing crimes, from using the drugs. We would do a buddy system, so like a key working system. So you were allocated a particular young person or a group of young people who you would check in with. So whilst you'll be on shift, there'll be 2 people on shift with these 6 young men. You would be key working one particular one. So you'd spend more time on a one-to-one. You would know their family. You would build a relationship if there was family still present. You would work in with their social workers. It was all that wraparound support that we did. But again, we got to understand who they are and what they love doing. And we became their advocates. So where they couldn't speak because being so emotional or very hot-headed, what it looked like just aggressive young people, and it wasn't. But their aggression, unfortunately, would be communicated to, the police or the social workers as, that this is their behavior, and they're kind of a write-off. And a lot of them, and the system, unfortunately, in Ireland at the time, never believed these young people could amount to anything. And they would communicate that in their non-verbal or verbally. Unfortunately, a few of them verbally. I could honestly sit here, Rob, and tell you of the most horrific incidents that I experienced in there and the horrific stories that I heard for these young people. But I also am really, really conscious that everything from the negative behavior and the drug use and all that sort of stuff, like everybody else is telling that story. And I think for me and throughout my career, it's telling the stories of the young people who never believed that they could ride a bike, and then we would teach them and they would ride the bike at the age of 13, 14 years of age. Or the young person who never believed that he could do anything educationally, and then we put them in a program and support them along the way, and then they'd finish their exams. You know, nice. The young person who never had a suit, like an outfit, you know, felt good, never went to a restaurant. We would sit down and teach them how to eat a meal in a restaurant. Like all of those things, I think, again, a privilege to do that for these young men. But it built a side of them or a world that they had exposure to then, that things are possible. And a number of them went on to recovery from their addictions, working in different areas. I'll never forget a young man that I supported. Let's just call him Dave for the purpose of this. That's not his name, but Dave reached out to me after 10 years having left the service, reached out with a photo of him and his baby, and he was he reached out on Facebook, and we're, you know, boundaries and stuff like that, you never become friends with them. And anyway, he tracked me down and he private messaged me with a photo of him and his baby, and he said, "Thank you, you changed my life." And then this big essay of how he was going, and he was working in security, and he was just realizing that at an early age, I was key working for him, but at an early age of like 14, 15, the conversations that I had stood to him today. And like, it's those moments like gives me goosebumps. Like they're the things that's the drive, the passion for all of the negative things that happen. That was worth it. If you change one person's life, it's worth it. And he showed me that. And it wasn't, and I said to him in the message, it wasn't anything I did. It was, you allowed me walk alongside you and you did the work. And I really believe that he did the work. I just was a conduit for and a companion along that journey to just show him the light. You got this. You can do it. Unfortunately, for a number of the other young people, I stood at their graves. I stood in speaking at their funerals. That traumatizes me, to be honest. Like, I still think back to all those young boys that we lost, and that failure of that feeling of failure. Could I have done something better? Could I have done something different? And that kind of leads to that burnout that I've experienced a couple of times. But you learn. You can do a certain extent, but unfortunately, the person has to take what you give them or what you say to them and actually act on it. You can't make anybody else do the work. They've got to do it themselves. And that's hard when we're talking about young people.
Yeah. Wow.
So that's a bit of a long-winded story as to...
What a story there. I've got a couple of questions written down, but you already sort of answered them, and that was, you know, captivating. So I'll let you keep going with that story because it's pretty amazing. So it's obviously a driver for you to see these people go through their changes and achieve.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing that keeps you going. Yes.
Yeah, it keeps me going, and I think I probably over the years realized that I need to experience that in different ways. So I've worked in adult homeless services. I managed a youth service in Northbridge. I worked from a support worker and then ended up working my way up and then managing the homeless service with, again, the most vulnerable young people. I kind of thought that I would take a career break when I went to Australia and do something totally different, but I fell back into my passion and worked in homeless services for a number of years. But again, whether it was homeless services or adult mental health services or volunteering, the thing is to be present. So just having that opportunity to be present with somebody and then influence their journey is beautiful. And not even about influencing their journey, but just stopping and pausing and going, where are you at right now? and having the dream conversations of like, what's next? Like, what? That's not always possible.
Would it be fair to say that the majority of people wouldn't give any of them the time of day?
Yeah.
Right. So you would be the only people in their lives, especially if we're talking like going back to the youth, coming from the types of homes they're coming from.
Yeah.
It's quite possible that you're the only person that's allowed them to actually have a voice, or to even attempt to try to communicate, because they probably never have known how to communicate, right?
Yeah, and it's not they kind of fear because, oh, they're not academic, so they can't. But I understood that. Like, I didn't want them to say a certain thing or do a certain thing. I just wanted them to communicate. And even if it was sitting there listening to them effing and blinding in the midst of a story, it didn't matter. Some of the young people, they would self-harm. And it was when I was dressing the wounds of the self-harm that we're having conversations of what they really wanted to do. So again, you're trying to, in those moments of going, okay, this is a behavior that they see fit, and this is a behavior that they are coping with. Just trying to have those conversations to go, if you feel like that again, what are the other things? Or like, what else could you do? And then from going from, cleaning their wounds because they're self-harming so often, to then seeing them do this project that we developed, which was Home is Where the Heart Is. That just came back in my mind there. Home is Where the Heart Is was a photography program set up where they would go around with the photographer and take pictures of where they see and where their heart is when they think of their home. And like, some of the pictures absolutely like blow your mind. It was like stairways and under bridges. We'd be like, is that where that was their home? And their heart was exactly where their home was. That was home, what home meant for them. We did an exhibition then and allowed other people and, philanthropic business people, everybody come in and listen to their stories. Like, the emotional weight in that room, like, I'll never forget it. Like, they actually were heard. They're not by only just sharing their story verbally, but like in the pictures, they were able to communicate what they felt as their home. But I've had a massive privilege to work along projects like that. Like, people go, you're great at doing the work that you're doing. Like, when I think back at the volunteering times, I got an opportunity to go to Zambia. And I worked in an orphanage, Mother Teresa's orphanage. So Mother Teresa, an unbelievable woman, but she set up these orphanages. And one of the orphanages that I worked in Zambia, when I think back at the time, I was very young. I was like late teens, thinking I was brilliant because I was going to Africa and I was doing all this work. What I got out of it was way above what these, kids in this orphanage ever got from me. And it was a short period of time. How much impact can you make over a short period of time? But it was kind of that ripple effect, like, the stone dropping in the water, and things happened as a consequence after that. So we knew that we were making somewhat of an impact. Also, I got an opportunity to go to Chernobyl. So directly after the Chernobyl blast, a number of us went into Chernobyl. I will say, Rob, and as your eyebrows raise, it was the most traumatizing experience that I've ever dealt with. And that was the fear of going into potentially still a radioactive space. So, putting our own health at risk, but also going into these compounds that were locked gates, like nobody was allowed into them. You would think it was like the military living, behind these gates. And you're going into rooms where there was children, lots and lots of deformities, totally like traumatizing when you see what you're witnessing. Like different stories still stick with me. So, feeding time at the zoo was exactly what it was like in these places. So food would be thrown into the middle of the room and kids on all fours would scurry and fight over the banana. They were living like animals. And again, like, trigger warning, some of this stuff is pretty heavy and pretty horrific. But these children were treated like less than anything, not like a human being. They were dumped, a lot of them, at the gates. again, like deformities back then was not accepted in the community in Belarus. Like, you know, your child was born with a deformity, they were dropped off. It wasn't a situation. But even to the like, I'm talking about not only just deformities, I'm talking about like disabilities, where in our community, thankfully, people with disabilities are integrated and, you know, live a fulfilling life. We're talking about people living with Down syndrome. Like, I go to the local shop and there's a man serving me that's living with Down syndrome, and we have an interaction as a normal. In this environment in Chernobyl, they're locked away in these rooms and treated like worse than you treat anybody. Like, literally worse than you treat an animal.
Yeah. Look, how was that a life? What then is the point, right? If we're not going to look after them or look after each other.
And it was like, it was sick because it was the state. It's lots of corruption and stuff like that, but it was the state benefiting from taking X amount of these kids in. Everybody would get this blue potion. I'll never forget that. This blue potion was given to everybody. Everybody didn't have the same diagnosis. Everybody didn't have the same sicknesses going on. But whatever was in this blue potion, everybody got it. So I don't know whether it was to do with the radiation and taking radiation out of their body. But I mean, the deformities were, you know, brain growths growing, and you'd have like, you know, massive amount, again, in another country, an operation or two, and you're on the road to recovery. Here, it wasn't happening. There was a lot of resistance for these Irish people coming in and doing aid work. From the staff and the management, they absolutely hated us. But fortunately, a Christian brother had got into the orphanage and ran a charity, and he was the only way we could get into this particular orphanage. And a couple of the different orphanages that we went to, I based myself at one of them, which was the biggest one in Gerardich, I think it was called. But look, again, the beautiful sparks of joy where, you know, we had no reactions from the kids. Initially, when we went in, there was a lot of fear, and then working with them for a number of weeks, the joy, the fun, like we would play, for those who had the ability to run around, that we would play out in the garden. They weren't normally allowed out. We were doing all these things. We were able to do personal care, so a lot of bathing and showering, because previous to that, the staff would throw them in a bed sheet, pull the bed sheet together, dump them in the water, and that was their bathing time. If you can think of like a baby with trauma being, you know, anyway, again, not going to go too much into that, but they were the things that would really upset us. But there was a bit of a drive then to go, let's do a bit different. So the harder we worked, the better it was for the kids' experience. But we also knew we were getting on that flight and we were leaving. And that broke our hearts.
Yeah.
Broke our hearts. Like, there was a lot of emotional.
Especially after putting in all that time, that effort, that emotion, that love that you're gifting, that energy that you're gifting to them, and what you're putting into, and then knowing that, okay, now we're leaving, who's going to take over and look after the modern experience.
And it would just go back to the way it was before. We just kind of, again, put that like pebble in the water, hoping that it would have some impact. We went out and we bought like a ghetto blaster, you know, like a radio, and we bought swings, and we bought footballs and loads of activity things. So the place was a lot brighter after us being there. But we know once we left, and the Christian brother told us this, everything was removed. So the staff themselves are living in poverty. So they would take everything. We would bring clothes. We would bring loads of Ireland jerseys and everything, like football jerseys. Again, everything was taken. But what did continue on was some of the songs that we would teach them. Like, I'll never forget this young man. We taught him Limerick You're My Lady, which is an Irish song, and he would sit and sing it all day. And all the little kids would sit around him. He was like a lot taller and a lot bigger and quite overweight. And he was blind, and he would sit with his eyes shut, tied, unfortunately, to a bench. But all the kids would come around him and he would just sing. It was like the little Pied Piper, like everybody would come around him. But it's those moments, it's those like little sparks of joy of going, we got an awful lot out of the experience and way above what we gave to them. So I cherish those times, but I also know that all of those experiences definitely impacted me as well in terms of my stress levels over the years and my not fully understanding the concept of self-care. I talked about it a lot. When I managed services, I would make sure my staff were okay. But to be honest, Rob, I didn't look after myself in the way I should have. I gained a lot of weight. I was like emotionally eating. I was drinking a lot of alcohol. Again, Irish culture, so that's the norm. Like, of course you drink alcohol, but I was doing a lot of those things that wasn't healthy for myself. But again, it was my coping strategy and my coping mechanism up until probably a couple of years where I changed that.
Yeah. Yeah, that was one of my questions, because you've mentioned it quite a few times, is like, even going back to when you first started, right through your whole career, you're basically walking alongside trauma all the time.
Yeah.
Not only theirs, but what's going on with yourself as well, and from previous attacks and everything that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
So if you look back in the earlier times, how did that affect you with your career when you first started getting those attacks or the abuse, etc.?
Yeah, I think, to be honest with you, I think I blocked it all out. Like, I just kept going back in time and time again until it became too much. Like, I remember coming back off a night shift one day, and it was pretty like it's a standout moment, I suppose, for me. But I was burnt out, and I was burning out for a long time. But I curled up on the floor in my kitchen. I was still living at home at the time, and I curled up on the floor, bawling my eyes out in front of my mom. And she was like, "Enough is enough." I'd been beaten again. I had a number of bruises all over my face and on my body, and I shared that to say that didn't happen every night. Like, we'd only a couple of incidents where it was that bad, but for me it was like a combination of everything, and I was just spent. I was done. I wasn't probably taking the breaks. I was doing long shifts. You do a sleepover shift, never really slept, but you do enough of those. You're back to back, never rocked up for the shift, so you're in a 3-day run now. A lot of incidents over those times of the behavior and property damage and stuff like that, but you're constantly in the firing line, ducking and diving. But that over time definitely takes its toll. Like, I'm now in the education space and the mental health space, but I understand. I could speak from a place where I get it. Like, I've burnt out, and it's not nice. It's that total feeling of failure. But when you burn out, your mental health takes a toll on you, and it impacts everything. It impacts your relationships. It impacts how you show up. It impacts your work. Every single aspect of your life, it impacts when you're at that level, or you're really, really stressed out. So that's why now I suppose my passion is around talking about mental health and talking about the conversations that people don't want to have. I did a lot of suicide intervention and prevention work for a very long time, and my drive was to show people that support is out there, and be okay with not being okay. I don't think I ever felt that it was okay to say, "Hey, I'm not okay." And I'll say that throughout my career. I wasn't comfortable. Still to this day, I struggle with it, but I'm a lot better by saying, "Look, I'm actually not going okay. I need a bit of a break."
At that pivotal sort of moment where you're burnt out and from that incident, etc. What was the thing that changed, or what would you share with someone to change in that moment? Like, what did you do then?
Yeah.
And maybe what would you do better if there's something else that you would have done differently, just in case someone else is going through the same sort of situation?
I think I would have asked for help a lot earlier. I would have been honest in my supervision. So we did these clinical supervision meetings, which was with your manager or with an external person, where you go through incidents and it's really for your professional practice. But I would have been more honest in those sessions to go, this has impacted me. And I think back on, I really believe in the value of supervision and having those conversations, or even in the counselling service. I just believe that you should be able to offload a lot of this stuff so that you aren't traumatized and that you aren't carrying it forward. So probably that would be the biggest thing. And then also, when it does happen, to be okay with taking time out. So I had to do it in Australia as well after working in homeless services, again due to incidents. You know, I had to take a break. I had to take time out. You know, do a task job for a while.
Like time out as in days off work?
Yeah, I actually was off for a couple of months.
Yeah.
Off for a couple of months due to an incident. I was off for a couple of months, and it was kind of at that stage, due to the nature of it, I actually couldn't go into the city because of my safety, and because of this young person, unfortunately, seeing me as a particular target, and tried a number of times attempt at impacting me in a negative way. Let's just put it that way. But because of that, like, you know, being off, I understood the importance of a routine. Like, I needed to get up every morning. I needed to have a shower. All those things that I said to those young people over the years, like, even when I was managing the homeless services, people were like, "Why do you have to open the showers all day?" Because anybody has the right to have it. Like, everybody has the right. That sort of Maslow hierarchy of needs, like basic needs. I deserve to be able to eat and have a hot shower. Those things became very, very important for me when I was, you know, quite stressed out and burned out. So doing the mundane little things, like the little habits every single day became important. Exercising, going for walks, all of those things that we think, oh yeah, we know that they're important, but we're like, yeah, it's all good, I can skip it today, or let's not go to the gym, and all those things that we do as a coping strategy. Also the drinking, the partying, all of those artificial sort of regulators didn't really work any longer for me. So not diverting to those things. At that time, I probably did, like, not overly, but I partied hard at times, and that was a good coping strategy at the time.
Right?
Huh?
And a lot of people do, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Like that's given, like a coping mechanism given.
Yeah, and Irish culture, like, you know, people slag us about it, but like, unfortunately, the Irish culture is that, you know, it's grand, like, sure, you know, have the crack, like, go out for a drink. If you're meeting somebody and you tell them to go for breakfast, they'll laugh at you. You know, you're going out and you're going for pints at night, and you're drinking, and you're drinking each other under the table, meaning that, like, you just smashing the drink, and that's just our culture. Thankfully, probably through all the incidents and probably through my life journey, I gave drink up maybe 7-8 years ago, and I don't miss it. I just made a decision, and actually it was around health and it was around fitness. So I wanted to hike, and I loved hiking. I loved getting out in the wilderness and all that. That was my self-care. So hungover on a Sunday morning, it's not pretty up on a hike, like up on a mountain somewhere. It became a necessity. Hey, like, let's reduce the drinking down here and have a bit of a different lifestyle. I lost a lot of friends through that because I wasn't the party going Eimear anymore. And my circle became closer.
Too, right?
Pardon?
It's part of the culture too, right?
Oh, absolutely. There's something wrong with you if you're Irish and you're not drinking. You're either an alcoholic or you've got issues. Like, just point blank, Irish people, you got issues. So I had to reinvent myself. Like, my identity was so attached to this partying. My identity was so attached to work. But I do think boundaries was really important then for me. Like, I started to learn, like, to set down boundaries. I started to get into environments that I was thriving. So get into leadership environments. I did a mentorship program for a number of years, and those people influenced my life. The books that I was reading, the audio, you know, the podcasts, I was listening to people's stories and finding who I was and all of that. And I learned, Rob, a really, really hard truth that I really struggled with, and that was I wasn't practicing what I preached. So I knew that the importance of mental health and looking after our mental health, and I understood what mental illness was, and I obviously trained in that space and you know, walked alongside many, many people in that space and supported them. But if I was honest with myself, I wasn't looking after myself. I was morbidly obese. I was not training. I was always walking, but not going to the gym. I hated the gym. The gym environment felt like my worst nightmare. I hated it. I felt like everybody was looking at me. I didn't even want to go into a gym. I was addicted to sugar, significantly addicted to sugar. I would think about it all the time. I was eating a lot of chocolate and a lot of sugar, sugary drinks. I was living on Diet Coke. Flip back to shift work in homeless services. A lot of shift workers, you're living on bad diets and fizzy drinks just to keep you going. That's just your coping strategy. But it became, emotional eating got out of hand. A number of close friends of mine and family members were constantly talking to me about my weight, and I was like, yeah, it's great, because I presented very positive and bubbly and laugh, and I was great crack, and I was this person. Nobody was really too worried about it until I decided, again, like a bit of a breakthrough or a breakdown and then a breakthrough, I'm not really sure, but I realized I needed a change. My health was deteriorated at a rapid pace. And I made the decision 2.5 years ago to have a gastric sleeve surgery. Probably the biggest decision of my life, to be honest with you. Wasn't an easy decision. I struggled with it initially to accept that I had tried all the other diets, or I had tried everything, and I was at the stage of needing surgery. I didn't feel like anybody should ever cut themselves open to have surgery unless it was a necessity. This was like, a choice of mine that I needed to do. But I had a phenomenal surgeon, and I just had a book in. I'd cancelled 3 or 4 sessions with different surgeons just to have the initial consult. And within 5 minutes of meeting my surgeon, he painted the picture of where my future was going. And it was pretty bleak, and it was also very, very short-lived. The disco lights were on. When it came to my bloods, everything lit up. I had fatty liver. I had pre-diabetic. Again, as I mentioned, morbidly obese. I was chronic health conditions, and he just said, make the decision. So anyway, I made the decision there and then that I needed to go through with this. It was a conviction that I'll never forget, hit my heart, and I was like, there's nothing else. I was glad that it happened that way, because a lot of people battle with the idea, I need to do this, and should I do this? It was a clear conviction. I'm a very spiritual person, so I believe that my path was there, and I believe that I had spiritual guidance to go and do that. But once I made the decision, it was done. I gotta do this. Did I know what it was going to entail? Absolutely not. But I'll never forget the conversation. We were talking about whether I did the bypass and whether I did the sleeve, and the bypass will give me better outcome in terms of more weight loss and better opportunities. But I said, what if I do the work? What if I do the work that you tell me that is needed and do the sleeve? It's less invasive. Yes, it's pretty significant surgery, but I feel like if I put in the work, then I could get the same outcome. He was like, not many people think like that, but absolutely, that is possible. But he sat in front of me and he was like, you need to lose 80 kilos.
Yeah.
So when you hear that, you're like, that's a person.
Human. Yeah.
That's a person. It was pretty horrific, and I've never shared this story, and it's a great honor to be able to share it now, and I'm ready to share it. But it was heartbreaking to see the person, like, how did I get to this level? Like, how did I get to where I was? Like, how did I get to being morbidly obese? Like, how did I get to this weight? And also, how did I forget myself in all of this? Forget about the scales. Like, how did I forget Eimear in all of this? Like, I was totally blindsided. Yet I was standing up for to people, telling them about mental health, that I was going into the most horrific scenarios of supporting people, who had no sort of like future in terms of their addiction or whatever was going on. Like they were traumatized within their own journey, but I was walking alongside them. I was able to have really different conversations. I was volunteering for an Irish charity as well at the time, and going in when an Irish person would pass away, we'd support the family. I was going into the mortuary. I would see these people dead, like I experienced it all, but I forgot about myself. But for the first time, and in that room with the surgeon, I had to remember that, like, I was important and I needed a change. I needed a change rapidly. So anyway, long story short, I booked my surgery for a couple of months later. Very, very short space of time. I didn't tell an awful lot of people. I did tell my family. They were very angry and upset and didn't support the journey.
Okay.
I was surprised because they were
Because
my
of
confidant.
surgery?
Pardon?
Because it was surgery?
Yeah, because it was surgery. It was a cop-out. It was a quick fix. It was a failure, basically. That's how I interpreted it, and some of what was communicated. I would get like stats of like people who the surgery failed and they put weight on, and I would get, horror stories emailed across to me at night from family members worried. Again, love, care is all they were coming. That's the place that they were coming from. They cared about me. They loved me. They didn't want to see me sick, unwell, or making a big decision like that. But I knew that it was my decision. So I kind of pushed them maybe.
You're already sick and unwell.
And they didn't see that.
Right? Yeah.
They didn't see that.
Because you're still who they know, and that's what they're used to, and they love you anyway.
Yeah.
Then we're just going to allow you to self-destruct and slowly destroy yourself over time, essentially, right?
Yeah. Oh, I was destroyed. And again, family, there was people in the family carried weight. So it was again, who you're surrounded with. It was just what they knew. Like nobody would give up alcohol. My mom gave up alcohol whenever she had her breast cancer. She stopped drinking and stopped smoking. So I did have an influence in terms of the drinking part with her and
Nice.
like watching her stop that. But within the food space, it was like, well, no, you just go on the next fad diet for a period of time, and that's going to fail, and then you got to put the weight on. And this yo-yo diet was a part of my life for a very long time. I was a young person, like whilst I did sport and I played hockey, I carried all this extra weight for a very long time. But it got an awful lot worse, and I got a lot heavier than later. So with the surgery then came, okay, it's a done deal. I mean, I'm all in. My mum had actually been traveling with a friend and was in Australia, and was due to fly out 2 days before my surgery. And I said, look, I just want to give you the option. I didn't tell her that I was doing the surgery. I had told her earlier, but then I didn't tell. I had said I was thinking of it months before. Whenever I got the negative feedback, I never spoke about it at all to her until 2 days before she was due to fly back to Ireland. And I said to Mum, I'm going in for surgery. Yeah. It was absolutely like it broke her world. She was shocked. She was angry. But she said, I need to be here and I need to care for you. Of course, right? Like her carer driver, the mom who's always showed up is going to show up for me. So she cancelled her return flight, and she let her friend, or she postponed it, and she let her friend go home because they had been traveling around New Zealand and stuff. And she was there, and the day before I had surgery, she got very sick and we rushed her in, and that's when we found out that she had an obstruction on the bowel, and I signed over the documents that night for her having major surgery. The risks, we didn't know whether she would pull through it. It was very, very touch and go. Wow. And she said, I'm going to go through this surgery and you're going to go through your surgery tomorrow, and we're going to see each other on the other end. And when I think about it, it blows my mind to think that we did that. Signing that over out of absolutely nowhere. She was walking hills in New Zealand and in Melbourne and in Sydney and living her best life. And boom, the day before my surgery, 2 days before she was due to fly out, or a day before she was due to fly out, she comes down hard. I had a different drive. I'll never forget it. I had a different drive. I needed to get through the surgery. I needed to come out strong, and I needed to care for Mom again. So again, forget about me. I needed to come back in and do this.
And she's probably thinking the same about you.
Absolutely. We're very connected, and we're like the love and the attachment that we have is like never ending. But it was a big drive for me. I knew I needed it. So for the surgery, typically you stay in for 2 nights. I discharged myself after the first night. I was well enough to discharge myself, I will say that. But I got up the morning after the surgery. I was the last one in to have my surgery. I got up the morning after at 5 a.m. and I walked the corridors because I knew that if you walk the corridors, the gas leaves your system and that's the level of pain that you're in. So once the gas was leaving, I could consume the level of liquid that I needed to, which was 90 mils at the time, tiny amounts, before they could discharge me. I understood that really, really clearly. So I did what I needed to do. I got to work. And I did the work and I got myself discharged. I needed to be observed for 24 hours. I lived on my own at the time. So I got my bestie to come and stay with me and observe and make sure that I was okay. But the following morning, she went to work and I went to the hospital. And I sat by my mum's bed. She was in for 24 days or something. Like, maybe even more. I remember her getting out the week of Christmas. And we had a lot of touch and goes. We had a lot of brought in, having conversations. Your mum's not good. This is it sort of scenario. I was actually quite unwell because my body was trying to recover from the surgery, but I couldn't emotionally eat anymore. That was taken away from me. So to try cope in this space of, I was only on liquids, but I had to have the energy to get up and sit by her bed in the hospital every day. My brothers were working, they have a construction business, so they were super busy. So yeah, that was my push and that was my drive to do that. And then fast forward, she got out and she recovered, and then I focused on everything that I said to the surgeon that day of exercising and eating healthy. Put a plan together, a phenomenal team around me. So I had a dietitian, I had an exercise physiologist, all arranged by the clinic, and I had a psychologist. And I knew that the importance. A number of people go on the journey, and I've read and I've spoken to a number of people, but unfortunately, they don't see the importance of those people. If you rewind back to my journey, that fear of asking for help wasn't present. I knew I needed the help. So get the wraparound support, get the best people in the business to help me. And I did. And I was working for the Peak Body for Community Mental Health at the time. So I was front facing online doing sessions or out in community talking about mental health. But I began to practice what I was always preaching. I began to look after my own health so that I could speak from a different space. And I think the last 2.5 years has been that. I've been able to speak from a different space. I don't share my journey, but I will. I want to get into that space. I want to help a number of people on their journey. Have I arrived? No. Off scales victories has been endless. So being able to fasten my seatbelt on a plane and actually come home. I hadn't been home in 10 years. So obviously I came home to care for mum, but fastening my seatbelt on that plane was really important. I couldn't do that before. I never went on holidays because I couldn't. You know, a number of different things where, like, I wanted to hike. I always have this dream to hike Patrick, which is a mountain in Ireland, and I was able to do that a few months ago when I came back. Awesome. But the non-scale... Huh?
How'd you feel after you did it?
Like, $1 million. Like, I just was so proud of myself because I had to put in the work. But doing it and going, okay, this is epic. I got to experience what that feels like, that like adrenaline of like, yeah, I've achieved that. I've done there's loads of little things and big things as well that have happened in that journey and in that time. But also, if I didn't do that, I don't know, would I be able to be in the headspace to go back into that caring role, and particularly for the warrior woman that is my mom. And I'm grateful that I went on that journey and did the weight loss of, as I mentioned, the surgeon sat in front of me and said I needed to lose 80 kilos. I got to losing 75. So five away, and I'm still working on getting to that 80. But it was I never weighed myself. I only weighed myself when I went into the clinic. It'll come. That day will come where I get to the 80, but to get to the 75 and to maintain that for that period of time, and it's fluctuated now, but to maintain that for the last 2 years has been amazing. Like the doors, the lifestyle, who I show up to be, the ability to be able to walk into a shop and a normal shop and be able to buy clothes and lots and lots of things, back in the gym and training and stuff.
How do I ask this question? What's the difference between who you are now today and the person that you were when you were at your biggest, and just absorbing all that trauma and everything else that's going on in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's the biggest difference of who you are today, and when you look back at the old Eimear?
Be honest, I think it is back then I wasn't enough. Like my innermost dominant thought was, I'm not enough. I'm not
Mm.
worthy. Now I am worthy. Like I am enough. And I use affirmations and I repeat that to myself, but I
Yeah,
genuinely believe I am enough.
yeah.
It's a harsh reality to think that I felt for so long, and probably from an early young age, that I wasn't enough.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big burden to carry.
Mm-hmm.
And a psychologist that I work with at the moment talks about fat as fear, and there was a lot of fear in me, so I emotionally ate to try control that.
Yeah.
But I'm enough now. So it doesn't matter about the scales. It doesn't matter about any of that. Who I show up and who I choose to show up each and every day is more important. Like I can
And
make the impact that I want to make, not because I'm skinnier, because
yeah,
can wear a certain thing. It's not that. It's I get to show who Eimear is, like at the core, like my heart. I get to actually be me. And if
how did
people are
you
not
get
okay with that, that's okay.
how did you get there? How did you find Eimear?
Poof. How did I find Eimear? I think in all the journey. I think going through what I went through, like
Yeah.
having all those experiences, watching other people's trauma stories, experiencing it for what I did, going to those, overseas experiences and thinking that I was helping, but really it was probably helping myself more than anything else.
Mhm.
Failing all the time. Um, I didn't want, for a number of years, I didn't want to stand up in front of people. Like I wasn't good enough. I didn't look a certain way. So
Mm.
from going to that to now standing up, and even in the recent role of construction site, and you're going up to a group of men and you're talking to large groups of people around mental health, it can be quite intimidating. For me, it's not. It's like these people are all on their journey and I get an opportunity. But to see that flip, like of what I felt like before and all my fears. I
Yeah.
have failed. I can't tell you how much I've failed so many times on different things.
For,
Um,
for the for the people who, let's say, if anyone's listening that was in the old Eimear's shoes, and
yeah,
they're larger, or they're emotional eaters, or
yeah,
they don't feel like they're enough,
yeah.
what would be the piece of advice that you would give them, having gone through that journey yourself? Because
I think
obviously
yeah,
it's obviously going to be super hard to change, especially when you're in a completely different paradigm. You might not even notice, and you're
yeah.
not even aware. Um, what would you say?
I think that piece of like you're worthy, like you deserve to love yourself. You
Mhm.
think of all these external things. I think I was looking for that validation externally for so long. So I've got massive amount of groups of friends and always did, and lots of different nationalities and all across the world. Um, but really, if I'm honest, I've got a very, very, very small circle who know me, who I
Yeah.
allow into my circle. So I think it's about knowing, like, surround yourself with people that genuinely want to lift you up,
Hmm.
that genuinely show the love and care,
Hmm.
and that you get to be you. Like I don't
Yeah.
have to put a mask on. I think I've put many, many masks on. I think we all do. But who I am now, talking to you, Rob, is who I am. So like
Yeah.
a friend will catch up with me and this is who I am. I can't hide behind any masks. I can't fake it. So I think anybody out there is like gift yourself the opportunity to be healthy, to look after yourself, but don't do it alone. Don't kid yourself to think you can do it alone. You
Mhm.
can't. You can do it with a small group of people, but make sure they're the right people. So people
Yeah.
who are not going to backstab you, professionals who actually devote their time and energy into something. I talk about association and podcasts and stuff like that, but I've had key people along my journey who have changed my perspective on who I am, who have driven, like who has sparked a drive in me to just keep going when I
Mhm.
didn't want to, who has told me, of course you can do that. Like absolutely you can do that. who have bought my paintings when I've been painting, like who have shown me time and time again that, yep, validated, yep, you're worthy, yep, you're enough. But it all comes down to me believing that. And some days I wake up and I struggle with that, but other days I reaffirm myself, or listen to certain songs that remind me of I am worthy of a good life, and I am exactly where I need to be. And that is probably a statement that I've said time and time again for the last 9 months, because I have somewhat put my life on hold, and my life in Australia, my job and all of those, and I've just finished up my role that I was doing online for a mining company, which was the best job and the best opportunity with a phenomenal phenomenal group of people that I got to work with. But giving all that up to know where I am exactly where I need to be, and life, when I go back, I'll build my life back up in Australia, and I'll do all the things, and I'll get a house and whatever else I need to do, the material things. But the quality time that I'm getting right now, like I wouldn't trade that for anything. And who I am in this moment of being able to cope and deal with what it is life in Ireland, again is a testament to all the hard work that I've put in. Like, I'm reaping the reward. Is it difficult? Absolutely. But I wouldn't trade it for anything.
And what keeps you going? Because like it's been a massive journey. You've gone through all of this, and you still just keep going and keep getting better and improving self and knowing yourself further, because it can be a massive struggle for people who don't believe in themselves or have any self-worth to even take that first step. So what has kept you going the whole way? Like, how come you're not still stuck back where you were? Is there anything? Is there a vision that you keep on focused on?
I think there's a number of things. So I think, again, that ultimate feeling of loving myself and I haven't arrived, and keep striving for what's better, and how can I honestly believe I've been put on this earth to serve and support others. Like, I firmly believe that that's my that is my purpose. So I'm put on this earth to support others, to walk along their journey. So in order to do that, I understand that there's a period of time, and actually not a period of time, throughout this whole, you can't pour from an empty cup. So you need to look after yourself so that you can look after others. A good friend of mine many years ago would say, be the difference that you want to see in the world. I took that on very seriously, and I want to be the difference that I want to see in the world. I understand I can't do that alone. And understanding that you can't do it alone means that how I keep going is having the people that I have around me, like listening to the podcast, reading the books. But and I say this in a really, really like true and authentic way, and honestly from the heart, it's people like you, Rob. Like, it's listening to your journey, genuinely watching somebody, warrior, go through journey, and even before your journey of going through, working alongside you, just seeing how you show up, having inspiration. Like, you post on socials, you're doing videos. It inspires me each and every time when I'm like, don't want to go to the gym, don't want to walk. It's like, okay, well, hang on a second. Somebody else is doing this and has different cards been dealt to them, and they don't use it as an excuse. A number of years ago, a really good friend of mine was in an accident, and she was paralyzed from the breastbone down. I put all my focus into raising money so she could get this, I don't know what it's called, like a little automated walking thing. I can't really remember what it is, but I was driven. But I posted every day on Strava, and posted on all my socials for accountability, to let her and anybody that was giving me funds, to just say that I was able to do this. But it drove, because watching her not being able to do it, I had a bigger like a bigger fight to go, I got to do this. Now my drive, I suppose, is my mom, like watching my mom be super independent, running around after everybody. She's devoted her life to her kids and then her grandkids since. Watching her do that to now unfortunately battling the end of a cancer journey where, you know, some days she's not able to get out of bed, you know, drugged up with all the medication and all of that goes through it, but she still fights strong in her spirit, and I want to continue that on long past she's gone, and just drive that does drive me. But I've super inspirational people in my life. I've got phenomenal family. You know, as I said, my brothers are in Australia running a construction business. I don't think I'd be in Australia if I didn't have family there. But the work ethic and, you know, they overcame their own obstacles over the years, and just watching that and beautiful family and kids that they've brought into the world. And yeah, I think my job is not done. I've got a lot to do. You know, I've got a lot of I'm old. I'm 40. Nah, I'm 40 years young, and I think I'm only beginning to start my journey now. Although I started at a very young age, you know, 14, 15, sort of working in the space and doing youth work and all that. But I think that there's lots of people that I get an opportunity to walk alongside their journey. I mentioned art a couple of times. My ultimate goal and dream would be an art therapist. Like, just sit in the space of doing art and watching people have their own breakthrough. You know, from a lot of people that I've dealt with who are nonverbal, or, you know, not dealt with, supported along the journey, who are nonverbal, like watching them communicate through art is just phenomenal. It's not about the picture, it's just about the experience of them going through. And that's actually interesting, because I came from a perfectionist. I got to do everything perfect. The picture has to be perfect. I sold paintings in that way. If you go into my house here in Ireland, my paintings are on every single wall. My mom is super proud. They're pretty good, I won't lie, but like the pride in seeing somebody else love my work, great. Am I the best artist out there? Absolutely not. But I just love doing art. So, and I need to, again, aside that I've probably deprived myself of doing that art for a very long time. So I need to dedicate some of that time and energy now. Whilst I finish up my job and whilst I'm still caring here for mum, yeah, it'll help me process things as well. But yeah, look, as a snapshot, good people around me, asking for help, and continuing to love myself and believing that I'm enough. It's probably the most important things.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Like, that you're just an amazing human.
Oh, thanks, Rob.
Like, the experience that have shaped you, and to carry yourself through everything that you've gone through, and to still be you know, come out the other side and to still be so kind and caring and genuine and authentic, and it really shines through. Like, anyone that meets you would say the same, no doubt. And so awesome to see that you're starting to really dive back into your art.
Yeah.
Where can people check this out?
Yeah, so I've just set up a page, and it's pending. So it's launching soon, but I've just set up this page, Eames Creation. And again, Eames, because it's kind of a nickname. A lot of people, unfortunately, in Australia can't say Eimear, that dodgy Irish name. But yeah, Eames Creation, and creation because it can be anything. Like, I don't know where the page or where it'll take, because I've got a lot of different passions. But anything and all things art will be on that page. And I've done art, you know, over the years, but I also want to focus a little bit more in on that. Maybe creating opportunities. I ran a couple of art sessions and art groups, but maybe doing that when I get back to Australia. And in the meantime, I just got commissioned by my family member to do an art piece, which is going to be a big challenge, but a challenge that I'm willing to accept and see where it goes. Nice. So it's a painting of a landscape area in Ireland, kind of night sky. So yeah, definitely accepting the challenge. But yeah, Eames Creation on Instagram. And yeah, hopefully it'll develop, and I'll get into more and more art and collab if I can.
It sounds like something that will fill your cup as well.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Some of that self-care. So you've probably already answered it, but I'm going to ask this question again. If you could do anything right now, money's not an issue, just anything right now, what would that be?
I'm honest, take the pain away from my mom.
Mm-hmm.
So in her journey right now, that she wouldn't be in pain. And is that achievable? I don't know. But I think with the right level of medication and the right teams and figuring out that what that is, I think it is possible. But just to have her in her journey right now be pain-free that would be my magic wand. And also, I suppose, in, down the line, I suppose being able to share the story from a carer's perspective is probably what I will do. But again, like the cancer journey is not an easy one. So just just being able to speak where I can, and yeah, get rid of that pain, whatever way that's possible. and pain comes not only from a physical side of things, but emotionally. Like if you've got somebody there along the journey, that pain can ease. Just being honestly present. And I do struggle with that, and social media and the phone, and I'm needed here, and the washing's not done, and the OCD kicks in. I want to have a clean house, and all of those things, but really just being present and just sitting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Where am I up to? Who would you like to see on the podcast?
Ooh, so many people, Rob. And I say so many people genuinely because, like, I would love, that young person that I mentioned over the years ago that I got to walk along their journey to.
Yeah.
I'm firm believer of raising the voices of lived experience. Like I've dedicated literally the last couple of years to working alongside phenomenal people to share their story. The Michael Westons of the world. So Michael Weston has had an acquired brain injury and worked on site, and he's just phenomenal person.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody that gets the honor to listen to his story is it's so impactful. But again, like the homeless person that I've worked with along the streets, and you think, how is all that possible? But I'm fairly connected to a number of different people. But I think I would love to see real, raw people on this podcast. Like I am like, Rob has asked me on this podcast for what? Because all of the people that I can think of, like I can give you lists and lists of great people. And we've worked alongside some phenomenal people, the John Hayneses of the world, and many, many other people that I think have a story, have made impact in community. And I think by listening to what some of the golden nuggets that they will share will really, really impact and have that pebble dropping in the water, like that ripple effect that we want to create in community. And I know that we share and we're aligned with that vision of let's help as many people as we can, directly or indirectly. So I think that there's lots of people, and I can send you and put forward all of those people.
That would be amazing.
And I can't wait for I'll leave on this one, but I can't wait for the podcast where somebody has the privilege and opportunity to interview you and hear your story. I'm really excited for that. I'm excited.
Mate, thanks for giving us your time. I know you've got a lot on over there. It was a privilege to have you on. And is there anything else that you would like to say before we let our listeners go?
Just thank you. Like, thank you again for how you show up, how you are as a person, as a human being, how you choose to be within your work environment, how you choose to be personally. But honestly, seeing something in me that is worth going on this podcast again validates that I'm enough piece. So that's really warming, and I appreciate that. And I'm excited for you, and I'm excited for this podcast, and I can't wait to see where it's going to take you. And I look forward to just going along that journey.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you again. And we'll leave it there.
Thanks, Rob.
Cheers, mate. Bye.